I'll say a formal welcome to everybody to this United Nations Association Harrogate meeting, put on in conjunction with Harrogate District Climate Action Network, affectionately known in Harrogate as HDCAN, and which is a network of lots of organisations, seems to be growing by the minute, who have all got one thing in common, which is, as the name says on the can, that we're all trying to take action for the climate. So we've got all sorts of people here, and if you want to give a bit of publicity to the organisations that you represent, you can change your name on Zoom and put your organisation after it. So Anthony Day is sitting there in front of those glaciers. You can even give a plug for your wonderful podcast. So whatever you like, I thoroughly recommend Anthony's podcast for you to all have a listen to. So as you can tell, this is just me waffling until people get settled in and the latecomers master the technology and get through the system. So this is United Nations Association Harrogate in conjunction with HDCAN and the various organisations that they represent. I know there's quite a few here from Zero Carbon Harrogate, so welcome to you all. And a big welcome to our guest speakers. Kat Jones is COP26 Project Manager and Tami Pein is Events Officer for Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, and they will explain how they are building a community in the run-up to COP26. And after they've spoken, we'll all have the opportunity to ask them questions, but particularly with a view to what lessons can we learn from what is happening at COP26 here in Harrogate to engage the communities that are in and amongst us. I think at every meeting I attend of HDCAN, Zero Carbon Harrogate and UNA, the same question comes up. We always seem to be talking to the converted, and how do we start to have a conversation with those that are not already aligned to the climate crisis? So we're going to hear an awful lot about that this evening. So I guess it's over to Kat and Tami. In any particular order, Tami?
I think we're going to be starting with Kat giving an overview of COP and the work that Stop Climate Chaos is doing specifically on the COP26 projects, and also talking about their personal experiences at COP25 in Madrid. So Kat, if you're ready to present, I'll pass it over to you.
Fantastic. Yeah. And what I would say is I want to give a public thank you to Tami, because she does so much in this town, in Harrogate, as well as the stuff she's doing in Scotland. She's the treasurer of UNA Harrogate, and she's also beginning to do carbon literacy training, plug, for Energy Oasis. So that's great news. So let's hand over to Kat. And if I could just ask everybody to mute themselves. If I see anybody making a noise, I'll go around and mute you anyway. But as I cannot see Kat on the screen at the moment, I'm not going to mute you all because that would mute her as well. So Kat,
can you make Kat a spotlight on the chat? If you click the three dots next to her video, that will spot, and then you can spotlight her.
If I can find her, I will. Kat, start speaking, and then you'll light up.
The other thing you could do is make Tami a co-host, and then Tami could organise it all so that it works smoothly.
Oh gosh, you're so brilliant on the technology, you two. So I'm going to make Tami a co-host. Now, do I do that under participants?
If you go onto my video picture and just click the three dots in the top right corner.
I love it.
And then it says make a co-host.
Make co-host. Right, Tami, you are now powered as a co-host. Do I need to make Kat a co-host as well?
No, it's fine. Now I can spotlight Kat. There we go.
Fantastic.
Hi.
You're away. It's over to you guys.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak to you. And it's so brilliant to see so many people out. You know, after nearly a year of this meeting by Zoom, you know, sometimes the numbers drop off, but it's great to see so many people still here. So that's fantastic. I really love that question you gave, Clive. introduction, which is how do we get new audiences involved and new people that we haven't already been in touch with. And I'm hoping that perhaps when we get to Tami's talk, we might be able to think a bit about that and perhaps have some discussion afterwards to share ideas and ways that we can do this. So it's really good that to have the two different organisations together. I asked Tami earlier whether perhaps the Harrogate Climate Action Network is a bit like we've got a Scottish Communities Climate Action Network, which brings together all the communities working on their own community projects to do with climate and zero carbon and things like that. So it's, I presume, a similar thing, and we're really familiar with them, and they're a member of SCCS. So to get started with the introduction, Stop Climate Chaos Scotland has been around since about 2007, just in the preparation for our first, we campaigned to have a climate bill in Scotland, and that we achieved in 2009. And that was really down to the campaigns of the civil society groups that were our members and other people that we drew into the campaign. So, the importance of civil society actors in this space is absolutely, you can't underestimate it and you cannot underplay it, because in Scotland, we had one of the first and the most ambitious climate legislation because of Stop Climate Chaos and all the groups that we brought together. So as well as kind of community groups like yourselves, we've got members who are NGOs, who are development charities, who are trade unions, student groups and faith groups. So we try to bring in the widest possible spread of civil society. And in our work, we're normally found to be hobnobbing with civil servants, talking to kind of lobbying insiders in terms of big climate policy. But as soon as COP26 was announced to come to Glasgow, we realised we needed a bit of a change in approach. And so we've got, as well as doing that, our business as usual work, we are starting to do some very concrete movement building work, bringing everyone together to support global civil society as they come to COP. So I'm hoping that we might be able to kind of explain some of the stuff that we're doing, what a COP is and why it's important that civil society is really at the centre of all, and how you can get involved yourselves. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to find my presentation, which hopefully should pop up. This is odd. Hold on a minute. All right, no, that's fine. Okay, yep, so it's that one. So this is where everyone says, how many tabs have you got open, Kat? You need to keep your tabs under control. Open this, view, present. Right, so hopefully you should all see my first slide. So it's just an opener. There's an amazing photograph of the climate march that happened in Madrid. So we're in Glasgow. Many of you will know Glasgow, I'm sure you will. It's not that far away from Harrogate, and it's a small city. And what I wanted to show you here is that the site of COP itself is alongside the Clyde. It's in the SEC, which is the Scottish Exhibition Centre, big exhibition centre, but not as big as many like the one in Birmingham or London or even Edinburgh. But across the river from there is the Science Centre. And this is the sort of hub of what will be the official COP. The green zone, which is open to the public, and the blue zone, which is very much just for badge holders. And then you can see over to the right there is the city centre. And there'll be a sort of zone of activity in the city centre with work that we're doing with civil society. Glasgow City Council will have some activities going on there, some hubs of activity, and Scottish Government as well. So, but they're very close to each other. It's probably only a 20-minute walk between the two, 25 minutes. So you can see it's a very compact city. I'll move down. This is a sort of aerial shot showing the blue zone, which is in this exhibition centre, which has a couple of big event spaces and all these car parks, which will be covered with fake buildings, temporary buildings to house the size of the event that is needed, and the green zone, which is the Science Centre, across two pedestrian bridges. So to give you a bit of a rundown of what we're expecting for COP is basically, it's based on our own experience, my own of going to COP25 and my colleagues in Stop Climate Chaos Scotland who have been to many COPs before. So they can be enormous. So if you imagine that each of these numbered rooms is about the size of our entire SCC in Glasgow, it shows you quite how big it was. there's official proceedings, and this was a total mystery to me. I went into the official room, listened to a few official proceedings, but I just couldn't get my head around it. And when I spoke to others who'd been to many, many COPs and it was actually their job, they could very much understand me, because they find it really hard themselves keeping track on what's happening. There was a lot of chat about brackets and punctuation and removing words and adding words, and it was a very, very confusing place to be. So I think this is all inside this official zone, but that's not the only thing that's going on. At the same time as those official proceedings are going on, there's all sorts of events going on around the place. And one of them is, well, a lot of them are to do with civil society. Now, civil society, as we understand it, I'm sure you all know because you're all coming from civil society groups, is defined by what it's not. So it's not government, it's not business, it's pretty much everything else, perhaps not the press either, but there it is, it's everything else there. And within COP, there are some official constituencies, and these get to give a few words in official meetings, and they also have their meetings themselves alongside COP. So there's youth, there's women and gender, there's environmental NGOs, Indigenous groups, unions, and then there's some others that we're perhaps less connected with as SCCS, but all those other groups we would kind of connect with as SCCS in the work that we're doing. If I move down another one, oh, why am I not? Hold on a minute, I was going quite well then. Here we are, right. So alongside all of the official goings on, there are pavilions, and these are usually country pavilions. This is the UK pavilion, so there's space for panel discussions. They usually have evening receptions. There's lots of sponsorship, as you can see on the right. There's kind of areas where different sponsors will have their videos showing. And some of them are enormous. India had an absolutely enormous area. It was about 4 times the size of the UK one, and it sort of had a bit of cognitive dissonance in that there was all stuff about Gandhi and Gandhi's spinning, and it had a sort of mock-up of the bed that Gandhi used to sleep on, at the same time as it all being about investing in India and huge amounts of information about high-rise business districts and wind farms and renewable energy and opportunities to invest. So it had the feeling very much as a sort of trade show. A lot of this spaces look just like a trade show. There's also shared spaces, so NGOs and other civil society groups have a chance to have press conferences. This one is a press conference from Indigenous groups that was organised by Friends of the Earth International, and on the right you can see a Greenpeace stand where they've put some information together, and there's someone there you can chat to. There are protests happening within the COP. Here's one about carbon markets, and these are run very officially. You go through official procedures to get these signed off. Every time you go in and out of COP, they search you for banners and things like that. But sometimes things erupt into so not allowed protests that haven't been signed off. And this was one of them where there was a lot of frustration in the civil society groups about a lack of movement in the talks and worry that they would not get to a conclusion. So there was a protest, and it ended up with quite a lot of the protesters being corralled outside of COP and not being allowed back in. And not only they were not allowed back in, none of the rest of us as civil society were allowed back in after this happened. So as you can see, I'm just outside the corral, but I went out to check that my colleagues who'd been inside the corral were okay, because it was very cold and they didn't have their bags and things like that with them. But of course, then I couldn't get back in again. And so we were all locked out for about 24 hours until some negotiations allowed us back in again. So alongside all of that official stuff, there's a green zone. And this is what I showed as the Science Centre in Glasgow. And this seemed, in Madrid, I think it wasn't a great example of what a green zone could be, because it was all organised in a month, because that's how long, you know, they had to switch from Chile to Spain. And so it was a lot of these big fancy sort of exhibition stands that probably just roll off and on a lorry, and that's run by these different big corporations. But in the green zone in Glasgow, we're expecting a lot more involvement of civil society, other groups, of artists, of businesses, local businesses and things like that as well, because the UK government has just put up a, as about perhaps 2 weeks ago, put out a call for content, and they've said they are looking for content from civil society to put in there. They want collaborative projects. They want to showcase all the things that are happening across the UK in terms of climate from all sectors. So I think it should be a more inclusive area. And alongside that, there are the other activities that are not official COP activities, but that happen all over the city. So there'll be big corporates that will be doing sort of jamborees. There'll be, of course, civil society doing their work. And this is a photograph taken from the Social Summit. And it was incredible that within a month, they managed to organise space for around 500 people in this plenary zone. Plus they had the use of part of a university where they could do workshops. So they had a whole week of talks in the evenings, rallies, workshops and discussions, which culminated in a declaration from the Social Summit, which they took to the march and from there to the leaders of COP. And this is something that will be happening in Glasgow. So I am involved in trying to find the venue space. And obviously this is a challenge at the moment because of COVID. So what we're trying to do is we've gone from trying to find a venue that would take 1,000 people to perhaps a few venues that can be linked together by internet and film and streaming. And so that means that we can have the summit in multiple locations with perhaps fewer people, but also it can be simultaneously sent off to the internet and can be used in other places as well. So perhaps we'll have village halls all over the UK having this live stream to Glasgow, being able to do their own event, but live stream to Glasgow and things. So at the moment, as you can imagine, everything has to be as flexible as we can, because it could be that we can hold big events. It could be that perhaps we're limited to 30 or 50 or 100 people. So we just have to keep flexible. There was, of course, loads of space for networking, chatting, meeting other people, showcasing your own work that you're doing in your little groups and all the different activists together, and it had a fantastic atmosphere. Of course, there's protests as well that take place around the city. This is on the right, this is Extinction Rebellion doing a protest through the streets of Madrid. And on the left, this is Sustainer Klaus, who seem to pop up everywhere. And he's protesting at the underground station where all the people coming to COP would come out of and come past him. And then, of course, there's the big march. And this is another thing that we're involved in helping to organise, or supporting others who are organising. Usually the middle weekend of COP, and many of you will be aware of this because often there were simultaneous marches all through the UK when the COPs were going on. And I've been to a few of these in Glasgow, and boy, were they the most miserable marches the world's ever seen. In November in Glasgow, one that started underneath in a very symbolic place, but very depressing, like under a motorway bridge that never got finished, and in a really deprived part of Glasgow. And it was miserable and snowing, and I had a pushchair and things. And so that sort of informed what we're trying to do for COP, which is, you know, despite it being that kind of weather in Glasgow, to make it welcoming, to make it vibrant, to make it light, to make it exciting and warm and welcoming. So the march that we went on was said to have 500,000 people. It was absolutely huge. These are the leaders, the Indigenous leaders at the front of the march carrying in the flame. And to illustrate, this illustrates another area of work that we're involved in, which is trying to find a home for the Indigenous leaders' flame during those 2 weeks of COP, because this flame will burn for the whole 2 weeks. And there's a lovely place called the Hidden Gardens who have said they're happy to host. You know, it needs, the fire guardians are with it 24/7. So they need to have like a welfare space, toilets, a kitchen, a warm space. And also it's got a wonderful tradition of engaging with people across Glasgow. It's very welcoming. It's right next to a venue with a cafe and things like that. So we're hoping that that will be a space not just for the flame and for the Indigenous leaders to have their space, but also for during the day to interact with the public. Here's another picture of the march. I didn't take this one, I didn't take the other one either. You can see how many people there are there. It was absolutely amazing. And because Madrid's got these huge wide boulevards, it worked so well for such a large march. And obviously we're limited in Glasgow, and we're also considering what form any kind of march can take in November. And we haven't completely signed off on it yet, but the plan is to call for a global day of action rather than for people to come to Glasgow to fill the streets, because we think that it's much more robust, and also it could have a much, much bigger effect. So therefore, for yourselves in Harrogate, that's a job for you, you know, to join that global day of action, to make the streets really hum with the sort of vibe of COP and what we're asking for and our demands. So what our role is at SCCS, now no one sort of told us this was our role. This has been a journey for me, sort of starting a job right at the start when COP is just announced for Glasgow, and looking around and asking, so what's our job? Do we have a job? What do we do? And then realizing that nobody really says that it's your job, but somebody's got to step up and do this stuff. So we've stepped up. We've been very fortunate in fundraising and raised the money we needed for the team, and I recruited Tami to join me, which is fantastic. So thank you very much for Leeds activists for letting Tami go, because she's been fantastic working with us. So the first thing was creating platforms and places so global civil society can be as effective as possible. I mean, this is absolutely the bottom line of it. COP is not about Scottish activists getting Scottish, trying to achieve our Scottish things. We still need to do that, but we need to do that with a leverage in the run up to COP and after COP, with that excitement. During COP itself, we are essentially the hosts. We need to make sure that people have got a desk to put their computer, a place to plug in their computer, some Wi-Fi, a safe place to stay at night, a comfortable place to stay, that give that welcome and give that sense of Glasgow as a really open, welcoming, inclusive place. And secondly, it is to support and build the climate movement in Scotland and locally in Glasgow to leave an enduring legacy. So that's really, really important to us as SCCS. At the moment, most of our members are those kind of core, we're interested in climate as one of our key aims as our organisation. As you can imagine, some of the NGOs like WWF, like RSPB. But what we need to do is make it so that everybody wants to be part of SCCS. So other organisations, you know, disability organisations, local transport, local social care, you know, health, you know, all these different sectors, we need everybody part of what we're doing. So that is sort of one of the plans for what we're trying to do. So many of you all know Glasgow, and that we have got a really, really good story in Glasgow to tell. You know, the legacy that we have of the Industrial Revolution, as you can see below, these are the docks. And on the right of that picture, the sort of 3 docks on the right, that is exactly where the Science Centre is, on that spit of land there that sticks out in the middle of the, I'll put my thing on it, you hope you see this here, that's where the Science Centre is now. This has been infilled. These are the Govan Graving Docks, incredibly famous, and they're trying to save them at the moment as a heritage site. And this has all been infilled. This is a Queen Margaret Dock, I think it was called, and this has been infilled, and this is where the COP is taking place. So if you think about this as the history, we've got this incredibly industrial place, which was a cradle of the Industrial Revolution, exporting steam engines and machinery and steel and all these things all around the world, built with money from colonialism and that colonial history of Glasgow as the second city of the empire, built on that very questionable background. It's what do we do with that story now? And really, if we bring it round full circle, it's what started here, now ends here. We need these leaders coming to COP, this place, to make these decisions, to change things. And we've got a brilliant history of change. Out of that Industrial Revolution, industrial workforce in Glasgow came some really strong social movements. You can see on the left there, these are the rent strikes that were led by Mary Barber, who now has a statue in Govan to her, and incredibly successful movement there. Other movements, one to refer to that's really relevant would be the Chilean, the solidarity with Chile over Pinochet's aeroplanes. And this was a factory just outside Glasgow in East Kilbride, which was a Rolls-Royce factory that was mending Pinochet's aeroplanes, and the union refused to work on them. And some of you will have seen the film Ne Passe Rien. I'd really recommend it. And of course, the story there was that they stopped these aeroplanes ever being used by Pinochet. So we've got these fantastic stories. It's a really friendly place. It's a really welcoming place. And that is what we want to people to feel when they come to Glasgow. Our priorities, the warmth of the Glasgow welcome and a sense of place. Like when I was in Madrid, I could have been anywhere. It really didn't feel like I was in Spain. I was just in Underground Station, and then I was up in COP. Whereas if we can create that kind of warmth, that kind of welcome, it would be amazing for people. We want the voices of those most affected by the climate emergency to come to the fore. And also we want those voices from inside COP to be heard outside, and the voices outside COP to be heard inside. So we're working on making that connection through one of the pavilions there, that's the Cries Feb pavilion, that we hope will be able to have a direct link into the Green Zone with another Cries Feb pavilion, and so we can bring activists in to speak into COP. And of course, linking local activists to global activists. You know, we're hoping to create homestays, so we'll have a platform for people in Glasgow who've got homes with a spare room to put that up, and then there we'll have global activists staying with them, and it'd be a fantastic connection. Also, we're going to create a hub for the whole 2 weeks of COP, which will be full of activists coming backwards and forwards and meeting with local activists, and hopefully leaving this legacy of a real desire for ongoing really hard work of climate activism to continue after COP. I'm going to just stop screen sharing now. There we go. So I'm going to hand over to Tami to give you a bit of the lowdown on what we're doing, and some specifically the Climate Fringe, but to give you a kind of reason why we're working in this way, it's all down to these things that I've said that we're trying to do. So we really believe that the climate movement should be as broad, should encompass everybody. And we believe also that a lot of people are doing work that we have no idea about, but we want to have a place where they can put their efforts. So we've created the Climate Fringe as a place which is completely uncurated. So it is inspired by the Edinburgh Fringe, of course. Being Scottish, that gives it a sense of place as well. But the Edinburgh Fringe, we went to see the Edinburgh Fringe when we started planning this, and asked their advice on how they do it. And their way of, sort of their mission is that anybody who has a show to share and a venue that will host them can be part of the Edinburgh Fringe. There's nobody saying, well, that's not art, you can't do that, that's rubbish, or your show's rubbish. It's everyone is there. So what we've got the same, is that everybody is welcome. We want to show everything that's going on and build a movement and build this kind of energy towards COP. So I'm going to hand you over to Tami now.
Before you do, Kat, just a quick word that I love that spirit of inclusivity and the way that you brought it to life for Glasgow. And we had similar conversations at the last HD CAN communications meeting, where we were talking about those groups that are on the fringe of what we do, but not directly in it. And one that got a particular mention was the Ramblers, who of course through their activities do all sorts directly and indirectly for the climate, and yet you wouldn't necessarily think of them as a climate action group. So, you know, we're thinking of involving them, inviting them to United Nations Association and so on. Thank you so much for your talk, and I listened attentively to Tami. And by the way, if anybody wants to put any questions into the chat, we'll make sure that Tami and Kat get them after Tami has spoken. Thanks, Kat.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Kat, for that great overview of what Stop Climate Chaos Scotland does, and also from your past experiences of COP. So in terms of what we're doing with our project, is part of that is developing an online platform called the Climate Fringe, and it's constantly evolving. And what Kat was saying is it's a place for all organisations to involved in the climate to put in their efforts, and part of that is their events. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you our Climate Fringe website. Now, here's the events calendar. And so what we've done is we noticed that there's so many organizations in civil society that are running events on the climate, but there's too many events and so many newsletters to sign up to. I'm sure your inbox is absolutely full. And so what we've done is we've created a platform to collect and store loads of different events from civil society. So here's a few. We've got talks on climate justice, energy efficiency in homes and small businesses. This is from Eco Congregation Scotland. We've also got further climate justice discussion groups and intersections agenda. So there's lots of different events, and we've got loads happening in February and then March as well. So that's just one part of the Climate Fringe. And with that, uploading other people's events and not branding them as our own, but having that one-stop shop for people to come and find out what's going on in the movement, really, I think, brings people together, because there's a lot of disparity within the climate movement. I'm sure that you'll find that as well, that people have their own way of doing activism. So we're trying to make the Climate Fringe a place for everyone to come together. And within that, I didn't expect when I applied to the job for the global pandemic to happen, but we thought, how can we still engage and like build community in a time of disconnection when everyone is currently just on their screens and behind a computer? So we thought, why not do a series of online events? And part of this as well was partnering with other organizations. So if I go down to, so this is just, you can follow this on the Climate Fringe website, but you can see a series of webinars that we have done to, series of webinars that we've done to help explain different topics around climate change, not only to our members, but we've also engaged with the wider public in Scotland and beyond. So we've got an introduction to climate justice, which is a topic that hasn't been spoken about enough. And as well, one that's really important to myself is Young Voices in Climate. And we collaborated with some young climate activists in Scotland who, one of them was actually in the photo with Greta Thunberg in Kat's presentation. I'll just scroll through. We collaborated with Just Transition and trade unions, disability and climate justice as well. And through all of these events, what really happened was we connected with organizations that might not necessarily work on climate specifically, but through the events engage their following within climate. So as well as that, I've become an unofficial official podcast host as well. So we've got great list of podcasts that we've done on resilience and a Christmas special. We also met with various faith leaders and did a discussion on faith and climate. So what we're really trying to do is go into lots of different parts of the climate community and beyond, and really build cohesion in a time when things are quite separated at the moment. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask Kat. Kat, could we do a bit of a Q&A? Great. I'm gonna add you to the spotlight as well. So in terms of your vision of the climate movement, what inspired you to set up the Climate Fringe?
I suppose it was just that I felt there was a lot more going on than people really realized, that there were things going on in very formal places, potentially like, let's say, workplace AGMs, or I mean workplace like meetings and things like that. So they might be doing something on climate, but really their work is nothing to do with climate, but they might be perhaps doing something that they could highlight. And also just like communities, just really small communities, perhaps just doing we're doing a chat about a climate cafe or whatever in the village hall, you know. So I wanted to kind of show that there's so much going on, and also to get away from that kind of us and them idea that, well, you know, unless you're tying yourself to a bulldozer that's taking a tree down, you're not properly dedicated to the climate movement. And you know, it doesn't matter whether you're just starting out on your journey and perhaps want to have a discussion about how you compost in your local community, or whether you're saying, right, you know, we need to change the way that they do things, and we don't want a third runway at Heathrow, you know. So it's a sort of, just to say, legitimize everything that's happening as important and necessary, and not just that we need more of it as well. You know, there's no end to that kind of effort that can take place, and there's no way that one individual person could sort of have an overview of it all. And so that's why you need a place where everything sits side by side.
Thank you. And another thing that I've found has been so useful from the Climate Fringe platform has been the venues and hosting side of the COP26 project. And I know you touched on it slightly on having places for people to stay, but how do you feel the Climate Fringe platform and our online presence has contributed to getting venues to come to our COP venues meetings?
I think what's funny, what I found about doing this is it's felt to me very much like, if you say it exists, then it's a thing. you know, and everybody's been excited about COP, and everybody in Scotland is really motivated by COP, and they want a way to be involved, and they want that way to feel connected to it. And you know, SCCS wasn't put in charge of this by anybody in particular. We just thought somebody needs to do this work, and should it be us, and who do we work with? So for us, it was really just saying this thing existed and then waiting for people to come to us, and it has been really successful. And we have got to a stage now where we can use the way that we're reaching out through sort of social media and through people getting connected with our events to start saying to people, okay, do you want to get more involved? If you really want, the next stage of involvement is not just to go to an event, but it's to sign up to our platform for hosting, like put your spare room out for an activist. Or the next thing is, like, if you've got a venue or you've got a very favoured local community venue, get in touch with them and ask them if they want to host activists in their venue to do an event, or to use as a little office or hot day space or whatever. So that sort of, as we're going on, it's proving to be a really, really useful place for just galvanizing activity.
Absolutely. And I know there's so many strands that you're working on, so many working groups that you're involved in, Kat. I don't understand how you have time in the week to just answer your emails, because there's some strands as well that you're involved with. One of them is the Arts for COP, which I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the Arts for COP platform and how that works.
So there seems to be such a real energy around artists and engaging creatively with the climate questions, the climate movement. And I've been thinking to myself the last couple of weeks, like, why is there's so much energy whenever I host a meeting with artists involved? The energy, the kind of the real tangible sense of we can do something, and positivity and optimism is there. And I think it might be because, you know, a lot of people are coming to this new, you know, they're coming to this perhaps in the last couple of years, and they're coming to it new, and they haven't been involved in climate activism for perhaps 15 for 20 years and got jaded. And so you've got this whole massive amount of energy from really creative people. So we're trying to harness that. I mean, it's in the same vein. It's like, do your thing. Everybody needs to do their thing, but we have meetings monthly where people come together, and we talk about what everyone's doing and how we can support each other and perhaps join together things that have potential to work together and be bigger than the sum of their parts. We kind of work together with that. But also on the climate fringe, we haven't quite got there yet, but we want to have a space for collaboration, because it seems that artists and creative people are crying out for links to activists and also links to each other, so that they can create these whatever moments and places of change. And I think that we need to provide that space where they could go like, I'm doing this, who wants to do it with me? And it's along the same lines of, it's like, all help yourselves. It's not like anyone is in charge of going, oh, you've got a good project and you haven't, or putting people together. It's like, how do you make this place where everyone can kind of network and interact?
Absolutely. And I think that's really chiming with the disability and climate justice webinar that we put on. And I think we both agree that was one of the best ones that we did. And someone's just commented about, is COP going to mostly be happening online because of how the government's handled the pandemic? And I think that just going on to that disability and climate justice webinar, I really found that there was a huge amount of audience participation and engagement in that one. And I just wanted you to explain to everyone in this meeting how you collaborated with Inclusion Scotland and created that concept for the webinar on disability and climate justice, and how you felt it was successful. Maybe the people in Harrogate could learn from the way that we're planning our events in a collaborative approach.
Well, I suppose it all came about because of someone that I met at COP25. So I met someone called Sebastian Joadin, I think his name is, who is a professor at McGill University in Canada, but he's also, and he's a law professor, but he's also a disability activist and a climate activist. And he's been working for quite a long time to try and bring disability into the COP as one of these constituencies. So the idea being that, you know, you've got your youth constituency, you've got your women and gender, you've got your NGOs, and actually it's often people who have disabilities who are the most affected by climate. They aren't able to adapt, and also they might even be more affected by climate change because of the reliance they may have on health services or whatever it is. So I was inspired by chatting to him, and I said, oh, do you know, let's work together this year up to COP, and I'll try and draw the Scottish disability kind of campaigns and movement into what you're doing. And well, I mean, COP makes these things so much easier, because when you've got something like that for people to kind of get excited about, and that, well, we can make a difference, how do we get involved? It's much easier. So I got hold of Inclusion Scotland, put them in touch with Sebastian, and we arranged to have a webinar. And I found that webinars have been a really, really good way of building alliances and building collaborations, because before, if you imagine what life was like before, you'd have a talk, but you'd have it in, like, say, Harrogate Town Hall, or in like your community hall, or wherever it was, and you could really only invite people who lived locally, and you wouldn't even think of having someone dial in from, you know, somewhere else. Whereas this meeting, we could have all disability activists from all over the place, and they could dial in. We can made it accessible as much as we could with subtitles and things like that, and but also you can have people from all over the world, and so you can get a much more rounded view of the issue. So you're not just talking about it from the point of view of people who live near you, you're talking about it from the point of view of international activists and international people with disabilities as well. So, and it was a really good collaboration. And now I think that Sebastian's working with Inclusion Scotland, I've had an invitation to chair an event on social care and health and climate, and so these things are all starting to come together, you know, and I think that's just from, really, it's not a huge amount of effort to put together one webinar, and these kind of collaborations come out of it.
Fantastic. So I think that we're at the time where we can open up questions to the rest of the group. I'll unspotlight us so we can see each other. So if everyone can go to gallery view. Clive, I don't know if you're going to be chairing the questions, or...
I can do. You're doing such an amazing job, to be honest, Tammy, but I can definitely do that. And there are some great questions already in the chat. I have to say, Tammy, that you and Kat are just amazing ambassadors for this. Just the way you talk about it is so exciting. It's making me want to go to Glasgow. And even though I've known about it, this is the first time in my heart I've thought I want to be there. And then there's another part of me thinks I want to do something here in Harrogate at the same time, so that it spreads. So I'm kind of in two minds. I do wonder what you think, actually, before we open up the floor. Do you think people from Harrogate should go to Glasgow and be part of COP, or do you think we should do something locally and spread the vibes?
Well, I mean, my response is absolutely, definitely do something locally, because, you know, I actually think that even before we decided that probably because of coronavirus, it wasn't going to be possible to do a huge mobilization, it's more effective to have local mobilizations, because actually, who do you need to hear your message? You need your message to be heard by your local council, by your local authority, by your local businesses. You know, if we're all going to change the way that the world does things, it's not just the world leaders that have to make decisions, and that's what we found in SCCS. And you know, we've got great big sort of good words, warm, wise words from the Scottish Government. Yes, we want to sign up to this. Yes, we're happy. We want to make a huge change in greenhouse gases over the next 10 years. They've signed up to a 70% reduction on 1990 levels, 75% reduction on 1990 levels by 2030. But that's no good unless your local councils are also delivering the housing associations are putting their insulation in, and they're doing heat, combined heat and power, or they're doing like renewables, or, so all of that stuff takes place on a much more local level. So I would say definitely be doing something locally.
Fantastic. Well, let's go to the chat, and I'm just going to take them in the order, and I apologize if I miss anything. Just coming down, there were some questions about streaming the video, but I think they've been answered. Lewis is asking historically. Well, let Lewis ask his own question. It's better that everybody asks their own questions rather than I just read them from the chat. Makes it much more interesting. Lewis, I can see you. Unmute and put your question.
Guilty. Here we go. I do want to second what you said, Clive, as well, about you guys being amazing kind of ambassadors for the cause, and the way in which you both spoke about the issues. I've kind of got two questions. I'm going to be a bit cheeky and ask both of them in one.
Go
My
for it,
first
Lewis.
one was historically, how, what's that, sorry?
Sorry, there's obviously a time lag. I just said go for it.
I've got really rubbish internet as well. Sorry if I break up a little bit. But my first question, is historically, how kind of online, how much an online engagement has there been with the COPs that have gone on, and how much of a shift is it going to be this time around? And my second question is, now I think what you're saying about widening access is brilliant. Do you think that the lines have been redrawn with the coronavirus crisis, and do you think people kind of in tech poverty are now going to be struggling with access, and how is there a way in which to include them into the fold, bring them into the fold?
Do you want me to start, Tami, and then you pick up?
Yeah, with the history of COP and tech, that would be good for you to answer, because I haven't been to a COP myself.
So there's essentially been no internet or tech sort of solutions to COP. COP is very much an in-person process. And in fact, if they were to run any of the official discussions online rather than in person, they would have to change basically the law, I suppose, of how UNFCCC events happen. You know, it has to happen in person at the moment. It's in the rules of COP. There is a very strong movement amongst sort of our colleagues who are more the grassroots and are in touch with the Global South countries to say that a COP really can't happen unless it's in person, because as you say, it's like links your second question to your first. Those countries in the Global South, many of them have incredibly challenging circumstances for connecting online. They also come with so few people, and normally at COP, the UNFCCC or somebody, I'm not quite sure who it is, pays to make sure that there's special advisors that are shared between some of the countries that really don't have access to those specialist analysis, specialist advice. And those people work with them over those 2 weeks, and also they have those kind of support also from civil society groups. Often civil society groups will be giving special briefings to delegations from Global South countries, and this kind of stuff can't happen so effectively if it's not in person. And so there's a very strong argument that actually a COP that is held online is an unjust COP that would have a lot of advantages for the rich world, basically.
Did you want to add anything, Tami?
And I think that's the same with the disadvantage of people who don't have access to tech, as you said, in tech poverty as well. That would mean that they have less access to COP. And part of, I think when I first started the job, Kat was saying with making the green zone accessible for all and making accessible to the public. For example, getting primary schools to come and visit the green zone, and people from the community who might not necessarily know about climate issues. That would potentially be harder if it's all online and you have to have the inside knowledge and have certain logins and things. So I think that it being online might be a barrier for a lot of people in Glasgow who would ordinarily not be able to access that. It's a good question, Lewis.
So it's more of a question, more of a comment than a question, but Kirsty Hallett, would you like to speak with Kat and Tami?
Hi there, Kat and Tami, and everybody else. Yeah, I was just wanting to say, I think somebody's already said how great it is to hear your welcoming inclusivity and that emphasis on collaboration and partnership working. And just picking up on a couple of things in the comments about the idea of doing something potentially in Harrogate. There have been some very early stage discussions through the Harrogate District Climate Change Coalition. A conference of sorts was mooted for 2020, originally to tie in with COP26, but of course that never went anywhere because of the COVID situation. Early stage conversations have started to happen about how something might happen locally next year, but nothing confirmed retiming. And clearly, in the spirit of collaboration and working together, the Climate Change Coalition would not do this on its own. It would be drawing on the expertise and commitment of other groups and organisations within the district and perhaps beyond. So that's a little update, but unfortunately I have nothing more concrete. Thanks, Clive.
No, that's a pleasure. And it's really good to collaborate like this, because I know that through HD CAN, there is muted that there may be some sort of a conference next month / April. That would be online. So we need to join the dots there. And also Holly, and maybe Holly would like to say something, but I know that at Harrogate College, they're planning a face-to-face conference on sustainability in September. Holly, did you want to say anything about that? If there is anything to say, hope I haven't landed you in it.
Hi Clive, thanks. You always seem to like get me up and speaking when I'm just kind of mic off. Yes, I am trying to plan that. I'm just talking to funders at the moment, so it's all dependent on that. But I think if we're having events here in Harrogate locally, we should definitely have the college involved and students doing projects, kind of getting the young people in the centre of it. And yeah, so regardless of the other conference that may or may not happen, this is definitely something I want to be on us to be involved in.
Well, it's all so close to the time, isn't it? You know, October, September with the Harrogate College Conference and whatever the coalition is planning. If we get our act together, we can really do an excellent job on that. I think Kat wanted to say something.
Yes, I was going to say that that sounds really brilliant, and that if anything you're doing in the run up to COP, you want a badge with the Climate Fringe logo, you can just use it. I mean, what we've done is said that our website, you can download the logo from the website essentially and just slam it on anything you fancy. We've got some, it's not allowed to be like against the law or like various other things, but essentially everything that you're doing will be within, you know, the bounds of using the logo. So it would be amazing if it could be part of the Climate Fringe, put it up on our website as a Climate Fringe event. And hearing that something's going on in September is very interesting as well, because the Climate Coalition, which you may have come across, it's a UK based, it used to be called Stop Climate Chaos, but they felt that didn't appeal to the conservative kind of voter. Their target groups like your small c conservatives, and they felt that was perhaps a bit radical to be calling it climate chaos. So now they're called the Climate Coalition, and these are the group they've got about 100 members. It includes, it's our sister organisation, you know, RSPB and big organisations and smaller organisations. They are planning for September a special highlight of week, and they're calling it Climate Festival. And they're working with us at the Climate Fringe to kind of, so our festival will be the Climate Fringe, but we're doing it the whole year. And we're going to have a focus in September as well. But if you're doing something in September, it could become one of those climate festival events that will be, you know, there'll be a lot of publicity they'll be doing. They'll probably get Chris Packham involved. There's always some celebrity they managed to roll out. But, you know, we're hoping through their engagement with like the much bigger PR messages than we can achieve in Scotland and that you locally can as well, to get the word out to those non sort of climatey audiences, to get more people involved and interested.
Fantastic. That's really good to know. There are so many dots being joined, and I can see people, including Holly, typing frantically and making notes. So Janine, Eco Biz Mentor, would you like to put your question to Kat and Tami?
Hi, thanks everyone. Loving the energy in this room. You women are just awesome leaders. Sounding Australian, but I am in England. But thinking about my connections in Australia and what we might do. But I was wondering about with the green space, whether you wanted an international presence or whether we should just focus on creating localized events internationally and connecting up with you. How do you want to do the international connection?
Yeah, so the Green Zone itself is run by the UK government. So we ourselves as SCCS are considering how we engage with that. So we are not likely to be engaged in that zone as SCCS. It depends. We're still deciding, because obviously once you're in that zone, it's a UK government zone. So you're having to do things that align with UK government priorities, essentially. And
let's forget.
So we're just slightly concerned about like being co-opted, essentially. But I think we'll do some stuff in there because our audience is the Scottish local audience. So that's going to be filled with Scottish school children, Scottish local people, people from Glasgow. So that's our audience. So I think we'll probably do something there, but it's probably not something that groups outside of Scotland would be interested in because it's not their audience. Okay. The civil society zone that we're in charge of doing is a hosting zone. So that's more about if people wanted to travel to Glasgow to volunteer for us, let's say, to make the space a really welcoming space, to perhaps do blogs, do, you know, support people with translation, or, you know, so that's sort of what we're looking for to happen during COP in Glasgow. In the run up to COP, we're saying to people, do loads and loads of events, as many events as you can to raise the issues. And if you're not in Scotland or Glasgow, then run events during COP, but in your spaces, not in Glasgow, because Glasgow becomes a place that then just becomes about how we support civil society to have a voice, because it's not our voice that we're trying to get into COP. It's like people from Kenya and like the Fiji Islands and, you know, all of these people, you know.
Fantastic. Thanks for clearing that up.
Fantastic. Sian and Bill.
Oh, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, I think they're working on it.
There we are.
Go.
Yeah. Sorry, we weren't ready for that. Yeah, was that the question, Clive, you mean about if the pandemic stops it being live?
Yeah, or whatever else is on your mind at this moment in time.
Yeah, well, just wondering what, presumably there are plans in case we can't actually physically get together. Is that, or is that, will it be cancelled completely because of the principle that it should be live, or will things have to change because of COVID, and not only, you know, getting together, but also flying and borders and all of that?
Such a relevant question with the new variations of the virus. Yeah, go on, Kat.
Well, we know as much about this as you do, to be honest, Sian and Bill. It's the UK government is playing its cards extremely close to its chest. And, you know, last week they put out a call for, you know, people to do stuff in the green zone as if COVID didn't exist. The week before they put out a call for volunteers. They're looking for 1,000 volunteers across the city to support the work of the green zone and direct people from the train stations and accommodation centres to COP. So they're acting exactly as if COVID doesn't exist and it'll all be gone by November. There's been no hint of any like plan B that we've seen from the UK government. Now, what I suspect is they've got a plan B and a plan C, but they've got them quite far up their arm and they're not prepared to show it yet. So we're having to plan. Civil society has to plan for a plan B and a plan C and probably a plan D without really knowing what's going on. So it's been a very challenging time for us, but we're now starting to move towards a situation where we have to make decisions. So there'll be civil society can't just turn on a dime and like switch direction completely from, entirely in person to online without quite a bit of time, because we don't have the resource. We don't have like 1,000 civil servants working on this. We've got like me and Tami and our colleagues in the COP26 coalition who've got 2 members of staff, so we have to start thinking about what's going to happen now and just make our decisions. So that's why we're starting to move to this idea of a global day of action and to encourage people to do events in their own towns and their own cities rather than to come to Glasgow. And I think that will work whether or not COP happens. And, if COP happens and it's big and they decide that everybody can go and it's safe, we can say to people, if you're free, travel up to Glasgow and take part. But if you're not, just do what you're doing in your city. And that's, I think, where we are. Tami, do you want to add anything? I do feel like Tami's...
Yeah, no, just from this meeting, I had an idea of what if the Climate Fringe, we could create some sort of toolkit for people who will be planning their own events during the time of COP, and especially from what we've learned of organising events and our collaborative approach, if there could be a section on our website that has a focus of what happens when, it is COP, because there's another thing called the COP26 Coalition, which is a non-hierarchical organization of lots of different activists who ran a festival called From the Ground Up. And it was a 5-day festival with talks all about climate justice, and some incredible speakers. And I think that was such a great international collaborative event, and we can really learn from that, and also from our experience share that with yourselves as well. So I don't know how your group is structured, but I think there's definitely room for that. What do you think, Kat?
Well, I was going to say that this would work really well if we could also have a sort of live stream that people could sort of connect into. So every event across the UK or even across the world once a day had a sort of update from COP. So here's what we know is happening in COP at the moment. Here are the areas of big problems, and here's what you can do about it. Because I was in a meeting last week with, there's something called CAN, which is called Climate Action Network, same thing as you, but they cover the whole world. And there's CAN International, which effectively is the body that brings together all the NGOs that work at COP. And there's about 1,500 of them in CAN. And they're very, very sort of policy heavy people. And I had a meeting with their chief executive last week. And she said it's the holy grail of what they've wanted since the beginning, is to be able to kind of give out messages like, we've got a real sticking point on Article 6, which is about carbon markets, or we've got a real sticking point on, I don't know, human rights in this phrase of the wording, and then get a global response really quickly to kind of make the cases to their governments to go, right, you need to sign up to this because, and it's not just us doing it in the UK, people are doing it in Australia, in New Zealand, all over the world, in Africa, in Asia, and wherever. You know, she said that would make a massive difference to how effective they could be, because then there'd be all this pressure happening in the countries to their country governments. So that sort of seems to me like, well, if we had one point in the day, like every day at, let's say at 2 o'clock and at 4 and at 7 o'clock, we'd have briefings and they'd go out to everybody. You could connect everyone together. I mean, we could do that. We could do that on our website and people could just stream it in.
Absolutely. And Kat, you were saying as well, when you were at the COP, there was this program that honestly, it felt like you were reading it upside down. It made no sense and you didn't know what was going on when. And part of, even though, of course, it being online wouldn't be our preferred option, but having it live streamed, especially to people all over the world, I think that having it online would make it more accessible as well, and knowing what's what and what talks are going on, and the information that's normally kept behind closed doors in the green zone and the blue zone. So if there's a way of making that more open source and more available to the public, especially civil society as well.
We had an idea of climate TV, like climate fringe TV, where we'd find all the live streams that are going on and live stream them. And I've already started asking people who are very connected on the inside of COP to put pressure on COP to put live streams out, so that it's not closed doors anymore, that we want to see those live streams, because people will watch them. Don't know why, but people might want to.
Now I'm very conscious that the questions are flooding in. We probably won't get to all of them, but I'm just going down them in order, picking out the ones. And Charlie, you probably know, Charlie McCarthy, you're next. So I love the tone of your question. So put it to Kat and Tami.
What I wanted to ask, well, the point I wanted to make to the audience more generally is a way forward for us to have something in Harrogate is to appoint a COP26 coordinator, event coordinator, to get something going here in the town so that we mark it in some way and so that local people can in some way feel connected to what's going on in Glasgow.
Well, you actually asked two questions then, Kat and Charlie, because it was the first question that you asked that caught my attention. So I think that's a great idea, and you got a thumbs up from Sean and Bill and from various others. But talk about the arts.
The arts. Okay, right. We have got in our network here locally, we've got people that I know, and certainly many other people will know, that are active in the arts, and it's to getting them on board. I was thinking about, I don't even know if he's on this call, Phil Knight. who's done stuff with XR and has done stuff with North Yorks for Europe and lives locally. We can get people on board to do that.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a comment and it's getting lots of nods. I'm going to move on. Mike Kay, you were having a bit of a dialogue about business in the community, and I know there's been some answers in the chat, but is there anything you'd like to say to Kat and Tami?
I think he's had to leave. I think he said he's had
Oh,
to
is he
go
gone?
now.
Oh,
Yeah, he's gone.
well, I think you did actually, Kat, respond to him talking about businesses applying for space in the green zone, but not likely to get in unless they're in wide collaboration. I mean, how does business in the community work with COP?
Well, I mean, the main thing that seems to interest the UK government is very big investment opportunities. I think they're seeing COP as a kind of lifeline post-Brexit to kind of get loads of investment in the UK. So the kind of things they're interested in, you can see from the sponsors they've got. So they've got SSE, Scottish and Southern Energy, they've got Energy Networks, they've got something on like cars and clean transport. So I think from the UK government point of view, it's all about selling UK PLC to people because they need like trade deals post-Brexit. So I would be relatively cynical about the opportunities for really good quality, sustainable local businesses to be at all involved, because I just think that they're looking for big ideas with big money behind them, and they don't really care so much about the community involvement, sustainability, etc., etc. That's just my impression of the UK government. As
many people know, I do know that Mike runs a small business and is particularly interested in zero carbon initiatives. So he'll be interested anyway. Tami knows him well. So let's move on down to the others. Where else should we go? Michelle Marks, did you want to say anything? You were going Yorkshire wide, I think.
Yeah, hi everybody. Super meeting. Hi Tami, who actually did my carbon literacy training before we were locked down, and as a result of that, I've now launched carbon literacy course. But there's a few of us in the Yorkshire area who are very keen to raise the idea of carbon literate Yorkshire, and we all train in different sectors. So it's whether that can. Asking the question how that can gain some traction with all these community groups. And it's again going back to the connecting the business as well that Mike was talking about.
Yeah, well, what maybe Holly, I'm going to drop you in again in a minute, Holly. Maybe Holly would like to comment, because I know Holly has got a vision of Harrogate College being a centre for sustainability, not just for Harrogate, but for wider in our region, and maybe there's a place for a centre for carbon literacy amongst that. I mean, what do you think, Holly?
Hiya again, Clive. Me and Michelle actually had a phone call like last week. It's so nice to see your face, Michelle. I've never seen your face. We talked on the phone, and I'm now in contact with some people from the Carbon Literacy Project, and they have released a toolkit, but they it's just not exactly 100% how to get FE providers to get people carbon literate grand scale. So I'm still trying to work on that. I've actually talked to Tami about it as well. It seems I'm going very secular with it. I can't get through on it. But yes, I do want it to be a centre of green excellence and for it to fit into our district and work for the district and get those people doing it.
Well, there are a few people on this call that have got some kind of stake in carbon literacy, as those who are on the call know. So we won't go off on that tangent, except to say there's a lot of interest. So do network and make the most of it, I think. So let's have a look down. Well, Marion Kempson, you were also talking about doing something Yorkshire-wide. Did you want to share that? Marion still there?
I am here, yes. I was really following on from the conversation before, and I think it's what this evening is about. It's not really about COP in Glasgow, it's actually about COP, I think I put UK-wide, Yorkshire-wide, Harrogate-wide, and it's actually trying to have, I mean, the only thought is sort of is to have a focus to it. How do we have a focus to it? And what, obviously there is COP, but it'll be looking at quite a lot of issues in terms of climate change and and certainly Yorkshire, right, a kind of a way of bringing people together, using it as an opportunity to actually build strong networks in all of the areas, so across Yorkshire, and also with the sort of the new coalition being set up across Yorkshire too.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, and I think I'm going to ask, where is it, Caroline Linford, because you're also talking about spreading the word and joining up the dots. Do you want to say a little bit, Caroline, about Harrogate International Festival and timing and that sort of thing? Caroline with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello there.
Hi,
sorry,
Caroline.
I started rabbiting on without unmuting myself in a classic 2020, 2021 sort of style. Yes, no, I was just saying that that I think Harrogate International Festivals, for me, I think is a really important tool that if the organisation are happy to work with us, they're such a well-established, well-known local brand. But I don't think they've touched on climate in any way or anything that they've done before. They do a wide range of events, but I'm not sure that they've ever done anything to do with climate. And I think given that they have such a fantastic outreach within local businesses, to local residents and further afield, because they are an international festival, I think it would be really great to be able to utilise them for Harrogate Action. So it's also obviously very tricky for them at the moment because of the arts being so under pressure, and you know how they will cope this year. So it is going to be something where everybody has to get together, I think, to work together to try and make this happen in Harrogate.
Are you or anybody else on tonight's meeting sufficiently well connected with the festival to begin to sow those thoughts?
I think it has already begun to be sown a little. I think Kirsty, who's also here as well, will know. So yes, I think possibly they're open to that conversation. It's just whether or not there's anybody within that group that has that interest. Whether it, you know, whether that's where they want to go, I don't know.
Thanks ever so much, Caroline.
No problem.
I'm whizzing down, and Kat and Tami, do stop me at any time if you want to get a word in edgeways and comment on any of these, but there are just so many. Catherine Ellis, and do you want to talk about the North Yorkshire Library and them in events? That sounds interesting.
Hiya. Not really, to be honest, but it was just putting my library hat on. I just volunteer at a local North Yorkshire library, and you know, in normal times we run quite a lot of events, and I just thought they might, you know, North Yorkshire County Council and possibly particularly the library service could be quite a useful, you know, partners to be involved in this, to run events right across North Yorkshire, you know, looking wider than Harrogate.
Well, that's really interesting, because that picks up on a comment that was made at HD Can, I think the meeting before last, where we were exploring the idea of a town centre presence for the Climate Action Network. I just wonder whether the library wants to get involved in that in any way. I know the thought was around all the various shops that might be closing with the current situation, but the library is such an obvious place to link up and maybe hook up with Holly. I won't bring her back into the conversation for a third time, but it's joining all these dots, isn't it? It's so important. Yeah, Pat Marsh says, let's pull together, organise district-wide events. Mike Kay has gone, he's confirmed. What else? Oh, this is interesting. So Ian at the Harrogate Cycle Action Network, do you want to say anything? Or did you say it last time?
Probably said it last time. No, I mean, I think this idea of running a series of events is a great idea. And it kind of reminds me of when we had the Tour de France came to Harrogate a few years ago. Welcome to Yorkshire ran this series of sort of events throughout the towns and villages around North Yorkshire. I remember having a fantastic evening banging out tunes on a ukulele in the Green Dragon in Hawes that was being run by as part of this whole series of events, and a few other things that went on around that. Unfortunately, the climate at the moment with COVID is probably not quite ready for that. You know, we can't plan something that far in advance, but you know, if we can get out there to some of the towns and villages outside of Harrogate, I think that would be good as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was thinking of the Tour de Yorkshire and everything that went on, and the yellow bicycles. I wonder what our equivalent of that would be. But yeah, great point, Ian. And I just want to give a chance. I know that Paul Haslam, one of our councillors, and also Jane Barrett have got all sorts to say, so I want to make time for them. Paul, are you still on the call?
Yeah, I'm here, Clive. I'm really just listening to everything that's being said. And I suppose where I'm going with this is really, it's about the content. I think that's what's critical for me, because, you know, if we're going to tell people that we've got to do climate change things, they've got to get used to the idea that they're going to have to give up their cars, even if they're not going to do it this week or next week, but maybe in 2024, when we believe that electric cars will now be at the same price as what we'll call conventional cars at the moment, although the running costs will be a lot lower. But, you know, at the end of the day, we don't want, there's got to be a lot less cars on the road, whether they're electric, whatever they are. So there's going to be a lot of behavioural change. Now, and I say I attended a national climate change conference, and they reckon that 40% of what's going on has got to be technology driven, whether that's some of it, another 20% is going to be things like, I suppose, something more radical like bus fares becoming a lot cheaper, so that it's cheaper to get the bus than it is to get to use your car. And that type of, so those sort of changes, which are sort of policy changes. And then the other 40% is all about us changing. So, you know, the fact that, you know, we're going to eat less meat, or, you know, and in actual fact, I'm a great believer that if everybody moved to a nutritious diet, then the supermarkets and all the shops would actually force the suppliers to change, because they wouldn't have the right food. And so that's people power, but you need a lot of people to do small things. And therefore, I'm a great believer that what we've got to do is we need everybody to be doing a little bit, even if it's only every person in the country that uses one less plastic bottle a year. That's what, 80 million less plastic bottles in 1 year. You know, and if you save, I save 1,000 plastic bottles a year because I don't use plastic bottles, but that's what I was using. Then, you know, if we got, you know, well, I don't know, 60 million people or however many are in this country all saving 1,000 plastic bottles a year, then we'd be making enormous differences. And I think there's a lot that can be got on with right now. There's still a lot for government and councils to do, a whole host of stuff. And in some cases, the technology has to catch up. But there, as I say, I think it's a combination. And it's got to be, you know, we can't just flick a switch and suddenly it's all it's all green. It's not going to be easy, just as going through COVID wasn't easy.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to go to Jane. I'm going to go to Kat and Tami at the end to comment and sum up, and hopefully get everybody away for 7:30, as I always try and do. But Jane, are you unmuted? Are you able to make some of your comments?
Hi, Clive. Hi, hello. I don't have an answer particularly, but I just thought, I don't know if you can see this, but today the front cover of the Express, and I suppose I'd thought, in the way that Kirsty just asked a question to Kat and Tami about, do you have any advice for us regarding how we phrase these climate conversations in a way that are persuasive to our mostly strongly conservative local residents? And that's absolutely it, isn't it? It's trying to make it broader and more appealing to everybody. And what I like about this is that you're part of something. It's a green revolution, and whether we can come together and think of, Yorkshire people do like their food, and they like to support local people, and they like local businesses doing great things. And I think if we could, through all the different groups, come together to showcase all the brilliant things that are happening in this in Harrogate and Yorkshire, because I think it's trying to inspire people about the positive future rather than beat them over the head, because that's what motivates people is, yes, I want to be part of this green revolution. So I suppose I was just saying that is, can we think of something that's kind of inspiring? Can we work together? And I'm happy to get a bit more involved. I've been very excited tonight. I thought it was a great meeting. So I'm going to pass back, because I'd like to hear what Kat and Tami have to say to Kirsty's question, actually, because I think it leads on from what I was saying, really, is meeting more people.
Well, it certainly feels like a green revolution on Zoom tonight. So let's do that. Let's go to Kat and Tami, just to kind of comment as you wish, sum up, and then let everybody go and get their teas.
Oh, thank you so much.
Happy for you to start.
I'm desperate to start on that one. I think that's such a good question, because communications and audiences and things is what I love. It's about finding the connection with the right connection to connect that individual person with what we're doing. And I saw that on social media, that front page of the Express, which is amazing to see that message going out to people who potentially haven't seen that in their newspapers they're reading on a daily basis before, and certainly with that really positive spin. And I think positivity and seeing a future where we all feel we can belong is really important. So I like the way that you put it, like climate justice doesn't necessarily fit with how people connect. So and you've seen the same research, climate outreach research, about the different I suppose like constituencies of thought across the UK and how people connect. I mean, one of the things we found is kind of very different in Scotland, but the justice sort of idea connects really, really well with faith communities. And often in conservative communities, there are a lot of people in these faith communities that could connect with that. But it is horses for courses. And, climate action connects with people more, or this idea of a green recovery. Everybody knows that we're now going to have to put a lot of effort, a lot of money into creating jobs, creating flourishing economies again after we've had this COVID epidemic. And that has to go into the right places. There's no point chucking it into the fossil fuels hole anymore. That has to go into not building more roads. It's got to go to building better public transport. It's got to go into all the other things we know, heat networks and insulation and all these things that we know need to happen. And to be honest, we don't really need to sit and do any more research about it. We know where it needs to go. We just need to put the money there. And I think the issue at the moment is there's a lot of invested interests in creating the status quo and trying to go back to how it was. And I think it's our job as society to be saying, no, we actually don't want that status quo. We want a new way forward and create that hope to take people to that new place. So that's my answer.
Tami?
And as well, just with the Kat, that's absolutely spot on. And I think with the Climate Fringe platform, when I first started the job, you were explaining that it needs to be accessible for everyone and using language that is welcoming and inclusive. And even though our title is Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, we've moved to create the Climate Fringe platform, really just linking into the culture of the Edinburgh Fringe as well. So making it as inclusive as possible. And yeah, I think that really in terms of building community, I'll just say again, the collaborating with different organizations outside of our existing climate network. If you've got a contact, getting in touch. For example, on Thursday, I'm doing a podcast with some people from the Scottish Refugee Network, and we're doing it on refugees, migrant justice and climate justice. And I think it's a topic that hasn't been explored before, and being able to make those collaborations with those organizations will then create new conversations which will cascade onwards. So I think that, yeah, chatting to people who might not necessarily be on our level of climate understanding, but then we'll just learn so much more from them. So that's just one way, and also doing carbon literacy and doing Michelle's course, because it's absolutely fantastic.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to say, first of all, a big thank you to Kat and Tami for joining us and sharing their experiences. Let's give them a virtual round of applause. You can at least see the hands. and also a big thank you to all of you that joined us. I mean, I have to say, we didn't get around all the questions or the comments, and I apologise to those of you that may have felt neglected, but unfortunately 90 minutes is 90 minutes. And just to say that the engagement will continue. I think there will be something online in March or April. You'll just have to watch this space. It'll undoubtedly find its way to the Zero Carbon Harrogate events pages. The recording of this meeting will probably also find its way there once I've edited it and everything else, and it'll be on my personal YouTube channel for those of you that are connected to that. You can always get in touch with me if you need to know anything else, and do watch the space for things that are going on at Harrogate College, because I know that Holly is planning all sorts of things. And if anybody's got any unanswered questions or thoughts they want to share with me, then please do so. I'm pretty easy to pin down. I think most of you know where to find me. And have a lovely evening. And thanks once again to Kat and Tami.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great. Really enjoyed it. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye now. Bye.
Yeah.